What is up, everyone? Crunchy Frog here, and Call of Duty Black Ops 6 has been touted since its reveal as having the longest development time for any Call of Duty title to date, with over 4 years of development since the studio's last game back with Black Ops Cold War in 2020. Now, I want to start off by saying Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is a good game that I very much so enjoy. But as I was writing my review about a month or so ago, I found myself wondering what exactly did they do with these last 4 years? Now, one would expect that extra additional year of development time to provide us with the most polished, feature packed, exceptional, above average Call of Duty to date, especially now that there's even more teams than ever assisting the process and stuff like that each and every year, along with the fact that the engine has been streamlined and kind of homogenized and everything into the Call of Duty app. And I basically, every time I play, I just find myself wondering, with all of this being taken into account, where exactly did that extra year of development time go? So today we're going to break down all the reasons why I just find myself scratching my head as to how they can tout this game as the most overdeveloped, time-consuming game to date. And so definitely let me know as you're watching through if you think this is the most polished Call of Duty or if somehow they squandered some time somewhere along the way. As always, if you enjoy content like this, make sure to leave a like as it helps others find the channel. And if you would like to see more content like this, including Call of Duty Black Ops 6 news, video discussions, reviews, and more, make sure you are subscribed. And if you would like to support the channel monetarily, go ahead and click the join button below. You'll get access to cool perks like a badge for the comments section, as well as viewing all videos up to a day early. So with that all out of the way, let's just get right into the meat of the video and break down the various things that just make me think something went wrong along the way, and this isn't really a 4-year game. Now, the first big category we have here is that, like I said above, the game is good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is a terrible game or I hate it or this is the worst, glitchiest COD of all time or anything like that. There's just nothing groundbreaking, right? Which you kind of expect with a game that has had the longest time in the oven out of the entire franchise. Now, as I alluded to in the intro, this new process, this new development process that they started with Modern Warfare 2 back in 2022 means that a lot is carried over year after year and shared between games. All games are meant to kind of feel more and more the same. They're working off the same engine and stuff like that. Now, games in the past typically reused assets and variations of the engine, even though each development studio kind of had their own version or variation of the game engine and stuff like that. But nothing was quite as streamlined and homogenized as it is today, with everything being in the Call of Duty app and everything kind of running the same way, and up until some reworks, the exact same UI and different things like that. And this means that a bulk of the game was kind of built without Treyarch really having to do too much proprietary work or having to lift too much weight on the development process. Now, I'm not going to pretend I know the complete ins and outs of game development, and especially the Call of Duty game development cycle, including how much Treyarch had to put their hand into the mix to get this kind of homogenized Call of Duty app experience. But from a consumer standpoint, and any press releases that they've shared about this central engine approach, it appears that a lot of the game is just carried over year to year nowadays. And that should have, at least in my mind, saved them a lot of time, enabling them to work on other things, even during a normal development cycle that they wouldn't have had time to do before. And now we're tacking on an additional year, that fourth year to the dev timeline that should have opened up for even more time to get stuff done. And you kind of saw it last year, wherein Sledgehammer was able to turn around a pretty good product, especially a great post-launch offering with a very compressed timeline because of the Call of Duty app experience and things kind of being condensed. They were able to cut off a lot of typical development lead time and just get right to the heart of the matter. And you really saw them able to turn around a pretty good game in a short amount of time. So you would think with Treyarch actually having the opposite of way more time, that you would see that kind of express itself in the game. And I did mention this in a review, but the game doesn't really feel any different from last year or even the year before because it is using so much of the DNA of the past 2 years. And it kind of, takes away, again, another thing that usually takes up a lot of dev time is how the studios put their own spin and made it feel unique. Now, one of the things that you expect in a game like this, and kind of again in this same category of nothing groundbreaking, you expect a big feature. Every year, Call of Duty introduces a gimmick or a big feature that is meant to draw people in and show them that this game is worth buying. It's different than last year. And this year, they hung their hat on Omni Movement. And it was really the only major thing, new groundbreaking thing, if you want to call it that, added to the game. And it's not even sufficiently revolutionary, especially not for a 4 year dev cycle. I don't think anything about Omni Movement was so crazy and just genre defining that, you could see them spending a year or two just, honing in and fine tuning a specific system. It's a neat system. I think overall it makes the movement feel a lot more fluid, but it's nothing crazy. It's nothing over the top. It didn't knock me on my ass. And I even said that in my review, and a lot of people echoed the same sentiment in the comments section on that video as well. And that kind of leads us to the point that there is no major new system. They have all this time to develop a game, to throw in something new to the mix, maybe a fourth game mode or something different like that. And there's just nothing. All they really gave us was Omni Movement, and like we'll talk about here shortly, stuff like Classic Prestige, which on that front, Classic Prestige, while a great addition, is just reusing a system that used to work in years past. And so basically, they just took a great working system that we all loved away from us. And then, after several years of fan complaints and social media burning down every year, they've decided to give it back to us here in Call of Duty Black Ops 6. And then they just raked in all of the applause and accolades for it. Again, I love the Classic Prestige system that they gave us. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying that it turned out poorly or that they did a bad job on it. I'm just saying it's not revolutionary. They just took something that we used to have that was in every Call of Duty game back whenever it took them 18 months to develop a game and just plopped it down in this and added some cosmetic rewards for each tier as well, which again is a great, addition to the typical Classic Prestige system, but nothing crazy time consuming or that takes an insane amount of effort, especially when, as will be the case later in different points in the video, you'll see Call of Duty devs are now using AI to generate a lot of the 2D art for the game, and that's shown through, especially in a lot of the emblems. People kind of pointed out different ways they could tell that it was either AI assisted or completely AI generated in the case of some of the prestige emblems, or at least some of the art and rewards that you get for those prestiges, including some calling cards and different things like that. So not only was it not a whole lot of work to begin with, but they also had AI assisting to just completely take even more of a workload off of the developer's shoulders. And it really just makes it all kind of feel a little undercooked than it should be. Even if the concept of bringing Classic Prestige back and the execution thereof were near flawless, I found that the art and just kind of the laziness of some of it that's shown through with the use of AI and different things like that really just cheapened the experience. And again, made it so that it wasn't exactly a system that warranted an extra year of development. Now, the next point here, I do have to have a caveat just because this may be slightly controversial because I know a lot of people are absolutely over the moon with zombies right now. And to be honest, so am I. But I gotta say that while Zombies is a great return to form and I am loving it, please, please, please do not take this the wrong way. I am absolutely loving Zombies this year. It's just kind of nothing insanely new. Again, kind of like we talked about these last couple bullet points here. And this may be the closest example to something that did feel like it had a little extra time. Like you can tell they actually gave a shit about zombies this year, and that's great. But again, it's just, I'm looking for that step above, that extra mile approach here in a lot of these bullet points. And basically, it just seems like a logical progression from Cold War zombies with some Modern Warfare zombies elements, sprinkled in and mixed in there. So when I'm playing it, it tends to lend itself to a feeling that nothing I see stands out as like, wow, this is a massive undertaking. This must have taken hundreds and thousands of man hours to create. And, I can tell that they spent an extra year developing all of this. Again, it's a fantastic game mode. I am enjoying it immensely, but a lot of it is just reverting back changes that they tried making over the last few years that we all hated, and now we're just back to kind of square one again. And I do admit that it does feel, at the very least, baked, right? It's not undone. It's not super glitchy and terrible and unfinished like some Call of Duties have been recently. It just doesn't feel anything above and beyond. So I know this is going to be controversial. I don't mean this bullet point to say the zombies is terrible or anything like that. Again, this entire video is not saying that Black Ops 6 is bad, but rather wondering where that extra mile kind of comes into play, and zombies was one of the areas where I felt that the most. And I do have to say, part of this whole section about nothing being groundbreaking is that games are just kind of in a stagnant growth curve right now, kind of across the entire industry, wherein generational leaps between games aren't really as common as we were used to growing up. And almost everything has kind of been tried at this point. Not necessarily, again, it's not necessarily a COD exclusive problem, but it is worth noting because it'll kind of explain a lot of my points here that this video could be made about a lot of franchises nowadays that the dev time, the extra dev time that they're putting in, we're not getting any super over the top crazy advancements in the genre as a whole. Now, next up, one of the biggest things, and this is probably the category that has me most frustrated with all of their bragging about a 4-year dev cycle, is the fact that there's not actually even that much content in general. So to start off with, I know at COD Next and everything, they were flaunting around the fact that they had 16 maps, and we were all kind of like, oh, okay, that's what we had back in Modern Warfare 2, back in 2009 rather. So decent amount of 6v6 offerings, right? Well, then they kind of pulled the rug out from under us and said, no, actually, there's only 12 6v6 maps and then 4 strike maps, or the tiny little face-off style maps. And to make matters worse, a lot of the 12 that we did get were actually just cutouts from the Avalon Warzone map that we'll be getting here in 2025 or 2026. And a lot of them are not very good or well tested. They just don't flow well. They don't feel like classic Call of Duty maps. A lot of the community is very, very unhappy with the maps that we got at launch, and I'm one of them. And, obviously, yes, we did get slightly more than we have in some years past. Like that year, I think it was World War II, where we got like 9 launch maps, which was horrendous. It's still not that many maps, especially not for a game. Again, I sound like a broken record, but a game that had an additional year of development time behind it. And there was also the leaks that came out of the dev studio that they had to physically steal maps from last year's Modern Warfare 3 post-launch timeline. They stole them basically, well, not stole them, but, grabbed them off of Sledgehammer Games to use in their post-launch roadmap because they physically did not have enough content to meet demands. And so not only did they not have enough content at launch, it seems like their post-launch content roadmap is also struggling and that they needed to borrow from another studio for help. And honestly, a lot of the community believes that the one map, I'm blanking on the name right now, and I was blanking when I wrote the script as well, but the one where there's like the mock bank vault in the middle, it kind of has a very Modern Warfare-y vibe. That they released, they're believing that is one of the ones that they took from Sledgehammer Games. It's a fun map. It's great. Honestly, it plays a lot like a Sledgehammer game map. It's one of the better games or maps in the game, if you ask me. But yeah, again, so not only did they only give us 12 at launch, we don't know how many we'll be getting over the course of this year, and that really sucks for a game that had so much more time in the oven. They also only came with 33 weapons that launched, and I was looking back at previous games to see, is that a lot? Is it not a lot? I know last year I think we had like 36. A year before that we had slightly more. And yeah, sure enough, back in 2009, with a just slightly under 2 year development time, they gave us 46 weapons. And the infinite kind of scrambling for content back in Modern Warfare 3 in 2011, where half of the studio quit and there was the big lawsuit and Sledgehammer had to help out and all of that, they managed to give us 52 weapons at launch. And yet, here, with 4 years to cook, no major scandals in the development studio, we only get 33. Now, again, I think the weapons are good. They've already given us some in post launch. So maybe it's an issue of drip feeding content. I don't know. But regardless, we're only at 33 weapons as opposed to over 50 that they were able to give us 13 years ago with drastically lower development times. Also, I want to touch on again the zombie maps. Now, we did get 2 zombie maps on launch, which has happened in the past. Obviously, in Black Ops 1, we had Kino and 5 at the same time. I think Black Ops 4 launched with 2 or 3, as a matter of fact. And they're very fun maps. Again, I am enjoying the hell out of the zombie mode right now. But it is only 2 maps, with a third, admittedly, that came a little after a month after launch. Now, on its own, this isn't a terrible offering. Again, if this were just a normal 3 year development cycle, I'd be over the moon with the content that we got for zombies at launch. But it is something that you would expect just with a normal development period. Now, I will say that over the course of the last few years since Cold War, they have been dragged out to, forced by Activision to start shoehorning in a zombies mode to every game for the past few years. So I'm pretty much going to give them a pass on this one, even if I did include it in the video here, just because I know that a lot of their dev time on the zombies team, at least, was probably spent building those kind of meek and and terrible zombie offering for games like Vanguard. Now, I will say that this kind of bullet point could later be removed. Honestly, if their post-launch zombie schedule stays consistent, it's looking like we might get 1 map per season. If that's the case, I'll 100% admit I'm wrong and apologize for this point. But as of right now, again, not a bad offering. Just I expected maybe a little bit more with that extra year. Now, finally, here with the lack of content section, I will say that the campaign once again is a little short. And for years now, as I've been playing through Call of Duty campaigns, I've kind of always wondered and wished that they would maybe flesh them out a little bit more, make the stories make a little more sense. Instead of just hopping around to random locations with seemingly no reason, flesh out the characters, flesh out the story, different things like that that a lot of people have talked about in various videos. And I kind of expected maybe this year would be the case. And again, it's just a short campaign. I've played almost all of it and I've enjoyed a lot of it so far. And a lot of people seem to be very complimentary that have played the whole thing. But again, this is just one of those times where I think that with all that extra time, they could have really used this as the game where they maybe fleshed it out and built out characters a little more than they had in the past and made things make sense. Add in 1 or 2 more missions than they would have during the course of a normal dev release. Stuff like that. Now, this is very nitpicky and is very subjective. A lot of you might not agree. I know that a lot of the community is very happy with a 4 to 6 hour campaign. They don't want any longer than that. They want it to be over so they can go grind camos in multiplayer. And I 100% get that. But that's just something for me, something that I had noticed and was kind of let down about when I started playing the game. Next up, I want to talk about and we alluded to it when we were talking about Classic Prestige, but there seems to be a lot of laziness in the art category, especially with the use of AI. And a lot of this, even worse than using AI, is unchecked or unfiltered AI, meaning that no one seemingly is going over it after the fact, after they've generated these images, to touch up or correct things that the AI models just kind of mess up or fail to check themselves. Stuff like extra fingers or other weird inconsistencies and lines not matching up, and just that general garbled nonsense that happens in a lot of AI images. And it makes everything feel rushed and sloppy from an art standpoint. And unfortunately, this isn't just a few things here and there, right? If you follow this channel, you know a couple months ago I made a video where we talked about one bundle that somebody found in a store that had a calling card that had some AI art usage in it. But this is no longer just random, isolated incidents. It's seemingly happening more and more often with every update that they push, every store bundles that they push out to, everything just seems to have more and more AI art in it, and that's kind of really not a good sign in my opinion. I'm not a huge fan of AI in general, especially in creative spaces like with art design and 2D art and things like that. Super not a big fan of it, but to see it popping up more and more, especially as the community calls it out, it's kind of disheartening to see. There was also weird little, clearly just people aren't taking a long look at this type things. Like somebody had shown that on the loading screen, I believe it's where you're picking your augments or changing your loadout in zombies, you can see that it's not actually art. Somebody just did a screen cap of their screen because you can see their mouse cursor on it. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know the levels of QA that go into a game like this or what they look for and what they pass over, but I would think if anyone spent any long length of time looking at this game, they would have noticed, like the community did, that there was a mouse cursor on the screen in a background image for a UI, for a menu. And no one seemingly did. It seemingly would have taken all of 5 minutes to rectify, right? You take another, if that's the way you want to go about it, you take another screen cap without your mouse in frame. But no one bothered to. It's little things like this. Now, it's not a huge deal, right? I didn't cry myself to sleep when I saw a mouse cursor in a menu, but it's just little, unfinished bits like this that you don't expect to see in a game that took this long to develop. There's also in general random UI glitches or unfinished bits. It just seems rough around the edges in certain parts, and I really expected this to be the closest to a flawless release that we've had so far. And I also will say, while we're on the topic of art and art direction and stuff, that the graphics do seem to be a slight downgrade in some areas than the last few years. The game doesn't look bad by any means. It's still running on the same engine, and a lot of the stuff is the same, but a lot of people, myself included, seem to think that it is slightly a backpedal in terms of visual fidelity than what we've had with Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3. The next section here, and this is kind of in line with the random UI glitches bit that I mentioned, but there is still a lot of issues with glitching and netcode issues and everything like that. Now, the game wasn't a disaster at launch like something like Cyberpunk, but there are enough bugs and crashes to know that QA honestly could have been better for this game. And the chief of which is the netcode, which was honestly horrendous. Now, I know a lot of people say this is a Treyarch staple. It happens every single one of their releases and then it gets fixed over the coming months. But I just wish that they would have spent that extra year of development time kind of refining the netcode and refining that whole process, as it always seems to be a contention. If they always know they get flack for bad hit reg and bad lag comp and desync and stuff like that every time they release a game, you think they would have allocated a little more time to buttoning that up before it was released, because for me that was and still kind of is one of the worst parts of the game. Now, I will also say, and this is a personal experience, again, it could not be the same for anyone else, but my game still crashes a decent amount on Xbox, especially after the Season 1 Reloaded patch. I have friends that are still getting rampant packet burst on PC, and just overall, there were a lot of weird glitches around the launch window, and some that even still persist today. And the big, gigantic elephant in the room regarding kind of glitching and stuff not working the way you want it to is shadow banning and hacking is still rampant in this game. Now, I will admit that this is more so of a Ricochet anti-cheat issue than it is a strictly Black Ops 6 issue, but I wanted to mention it here because it does impact the game a lot. You hear people can't play ranked play because there's too many hackers. People can't really get into any serviceable matches because they're shadow banned just because a couple of kids reported them in a lobby for no reason, stuff like that. And that's a massive issue that I wish they would have worked on a little bit sooner. And the kind of the icing on the cake with this is Ricochet has been around for a decent amount of time now, I think since Modern Warfare 2. So they've had a long ass time, we'll put it that way, to get this right, and it is still honestly just as bad as it ever has been. And yeah, Black Ops 6 did not do really anything to change that. So, in conclusion, guys, I know a lot of this comes down to just the game just feels like it had a regular development cycle. I remember back with Black Ops 3 being when it was the first game that Treyarch had a 3-year cycle to build a game instead of just a 2-year cycle. And it felt absolutely jam packed with content and revolutionary additions. It truly felt as though you could tell, okay, these dev studios have a lot more time on their hands. They are able to really polish up a great product, and it really felt that they used that 3rd year very wisely, and it came out showing on launch day in the final product. And this game just kind of feels like another release, just like any other release that we've had for the past 5, 6, 7 years, except knowing that there was an extra year of dev. And that kind of makes it harder to excuse all the small bugs or errors or lapses in quality that you see along the way. For example, if your teacher ended up giving you an extra month or a semester to finish writing a paper, they're going to expect you to hand in a near flawless paper, a near flawless finished product, with maybe much more longer, much more research, stuff like that. And games and movies and different medium like that are no different. If you tell us and you pride yourself on taking an extra year of dev time, I'm going to expect much more out of the game. My standards are going to be a lot higher. So I want to reiterate that again, I did enjoy the game, and overall I consider it to be well done and a good entry to the series. But like I mentioned above, I just feel that it points towards a concerning trend of misused resources and dev time, right? You had extra time and you didn't really develop, or you didn't really deliver anything extra with that time. And honestly, this kind of points to a larger issue in the gaming industry at large, which is basically a misuse of time and resources in game development, and possibly, and I hate to say this, a possible lack of talent in the gaming industry that maybe we've had in years past. So overall, I think they really just should not have pushed so hard this 4-year narrative. If you watch COD Next, you know that they just kept harping on that until they were blue in the face. And I really do not think that it shows through in this release. Again, overall, a very good game, a fun game, but definitely not a game that has had much more time in the oven than, say, something like Modern Warfare 3. So that about wraps it up, guys. If you found yourself disagreeing with some of my points up above, or even agreeing with some of them, make sure to let me know down in the comments section. And as always, guys, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like, as we are trying to grow the channel, and that helps a lot more people find this video. So yeah, with that all out of the way, guys, you have a great day.